everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar in our coffee break webinar series of Forward Advantage Can Do That. We've heard from our customers that many aren't aware of everything that we offer here at Forward Advantage and that our customers are also interested in how they might be able to optimize their existing products. For example, many people don't know of all the many ways we can help customers who are moving to a virtual environment or who are already on a virtual environment. We hope to discuss how Communication Director is compatible in a virtual environment, as well as discuss the general challenges and benefits of going virtual on today's webinar. My name is Amy Leopold, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at Forward Advantage. I will be the moderator of today's webinar. Our speakers today are Michael Fagan and Christian Bermudez. Michael is a specialist in our Client Services Department and has years of experience installing Communication Director into virtual environments. Christian is a solution architect here and with extensive hands-on experience helping some of our largest customers maximize their virtual investments. We're lucky to have both of these technical experts here with us today to share their knowledge and experience. There are lots of people on the line, so your phones are muted. If you do have a question, please enter it into the question box, and we'll try to answer all questions at the end of the webinar if we have time. We will be recording this webinar, and we'll be sending out an email with a link to the recording after the webinar has concluded. So thank you again, everybody, for attending. Let's go through our agenda for today. And again, this is the Moving to a Virtual Environment Tips for an Easy Transition webinar, where we'll concentrate on how Communication Director interacts in a virtual webinar. So our agenda is Forward Advantage Solutions Overview, a Virtualization Overview, and then Communication Director and Virtualization, as well as talking about one of our more successful virtualization customers. To start off our webinar, I'd like to review all of the many solutions that we offer at Forward Advantage. We have three main areas of focus: our interoperability solutions, where we have our main product, our Communication Director. We also have identity and access management solutions and our migration solutions. Many of you may not be aware that we offer all of these solutions, and some of them that we offer are, secure texting, single sign-on, and virtual desktop. We will talk a little bit about virtual desktop later in the webinar today as well, if you're interested. But mostly today we'll be focusing on our customers who are already on a virtual environment or moving to a virtual environment and how Communication Director works in that environment. And with that, I'll pass it over to Michael to walk through an overview of virtualization and how Communication Director works in that virtual environment. All right, Michael, here you go.
Thank you. As Amy mentioned, today we're going to be discussing virtualization. So what is virtualization, or what does it mean to be virtualized? In simple terms, virtualization is a software technology that makes it possible to create a virtual computer system or systems using the existing hardware of a single physical server. This allows you to run multiple operating systems and applications at the same time, all on the same server. With traditional architecture, you would have a physical server with an operating system and an application set. With a virtual setup, you would still have a physical server, but you would also have software that would allow you to have many different virtual machines, each with its own operating system and applications. So how does virtualization work? At the core of it all is the virtual machine, or VM for short. The VM is basically an isolated software container with its own operating system and a thin layer of software called a hypervisor inside. The hypervisor is what separates the virtual machines from the host and dynamically allocates the resources to each virtual machine as they need them. Again, this means that you can have many different applications or virtual servers on each physical server. It allows you to maximize server resources and reduce the number of physical servers that you may have. It also means faster, easier application and resource provisioning. Why is everyone going virtual? As you can see on this slide, there are a number of reasons to go virtual. But very simply, it all comes down to it's easily scalable, and most importantly, it means reduced costs, which mean greater overall profitability. At Forward Advantage, we are seeing a growing trend in customers moving to a virtual environment. We are receiving more requests for virtually compatible products, as well as requests for help in navigating the move to a virtual environment. A significant percentage of our communication director customers are now virtual, and we continue to see the trend to virtualize increase. It has become part of our everyday work to help integrate communication director with those virtual environments. There are many key things to consider when moving to a virtual environment, and these are just some of the considerations or questions to ask. Today we're going to focus on number 2. Are all my applications supported in a virtual environment? And if you're a communication director client, is that application supported? The answer is yes. If you have communication director, you want to consider how to move it to your virtual environment, and it's likely why you're attending this webinar. Luckily, we have optimized the process for you, making a communication director virtual, and we'll walk you through how easy the process is in the next few slides. But before we look at virtualizing communication director, let's take a look at traditional faxing versus virtual faxing. With a traditional fax setup, you have a physical server with a fax card. Analog phone lines are then plugged into the fax card, which then connect to your telephone company, which in turn connects to the recipient's fax machine. With a virtual setup, there's a virtual server, but there isn't a fax card that can be installed. So software is used instead of the physical fax card. This software, called SR140, connects to either your existing gateway or a dialogic media gateway, which is also known as a DMG. A DMG is basically a piece of hardware that connects to your network and is used with your legacy PBX equipment, either of which allow you to fax over IP to the telco and then to the recipient's fax machine. So what do you need to make communication director virtual? We kind of touched on it on the previous slide, but there are 3 basic things you'll need to make communication director virtual. You'll need a virtual server, the Dialogic Brooktrout SR140 fax software, and a Dialogic certified gateway, which can either be the Dialogic Media Gateway or a certified voice over IP system like Cisco, Unified Call Manager, Avaya. There's a number of them out there. As long as it's certified by Dialogic, you should be in pretty good shape. Now, of course, you would need to provide the virtual server, but Forward Advantage does offer the Dialogic fax software and the Dialogic Media Gateway, or you can use your own VoIP system if you'd like. If you have an existing gateway and you're wondering if it's compatible, we have a great sales staff that can answer any questions that you may have. Now that we've talked about the requirements needed to go virtual with Communication Director, once you have those necessary requirements, the next step is the implementation process. The first thing that we'll do is perform what we call digital testing. This is where we license and install the SR140 software on the virtual server. We then use a fax diagnostic tool to confirm the ability to dial out and receive calls using the fax software in the gateway. It's also an opportunity to validate the specific dialing rules you may have, which are needed to make outbound calls. Once we have confirmation that everything works, we can then move on to the Communication Director installation. At this point, we install the latest version of the Communication Director software. We test it and make sure that everything is functioning. And if you're new to Communication Director, then you're pretty much done and ready to go. If you're already a customer, the next step is to move the existing data and configurations from the physical server to the new virtual server. And we do this by stopping the Communication Director service on the old server, backing up the SQL databases, configuration files, report files, and copying them over to the new server. We then restore the SQL databases, move the files to their respective locations. Next, we update the data and configure the software. Once done, we can then test the system to make sure it's operational and let you know that the upgrade is complete and the system is back up and running. So as long as you have a virtual server, we can provide you what you need to make Communication Director work in a virtual environment. It's an easy transition, and as we said in the previous slides, many of our current Communication Director customer base have already gone virtual and are experiencing the benefits of virtualization. Now turn the stage over to Christian Bermudez, who is a solutions architect with our IM1 team, to talk about the additional Forward Advantage virtualization offerings.
Thanks, Michael. So my name is Christian Bermudez, solution architect here for Forward Advantage. Been working tightly with Michael on a specific customer here in California, moving them to CDS 4.0 platform and also in a VDI infrastructure. So I'm going to cover a little bit about VDI, what it is, why we're doing it, and then why this specific customer is doing it. As Michael said, it's software. It basically runs in a container. It keeps it simple. So a big thing we're seeing today is, why do we go to a desktop virtualization? Well, simply is one, XP just went away. So a lot of customers are having to move from XP to Windows 7 or Windows 10, Windows 8, depending on the flavor they want to go to. But it's making it easier on the IT management. It's being able to streamline the management, being able to provision users, being able to deliver desktops, being able to deliver applications in a one-click fashion to the end user without being disruptive, which we all know in healthcare is very important. I'm going to touch on one of our larger West Coast customers. They have over 16 facilities, over 28,000 employees. Currently, we see about 16,000 active sessions per 7-day cycle. On a given day, we see about 7,000 to 8,000 concurrent sessions. So we definitely have a lot of users on the system. This particular organization uses OneSign for some of their quick no access, quick access to the endpoint. And we see about 900,000 authentications strictly on username and password or badge taps with OneSign in this customer. So why did this customer sort of come to us? Well, they came from a more of a legacy poor man solution for VDI, which was more based around the XenApp solution. So they started with XenApp 5, publishing out a server 2003 server. Then they migrated over to a server 2008 R2 using XenApp 6.5. But at some point they decided, well, we need to use dictation and we need to find a better print solution. And running in a shared environment just isn't working. So they decided to move to XenDesktop 7.6. Moving to 7.6 helped these folks really understand what they can get from what they paid for. So we're no longer doing a shared resource. We're doing one user per one VM. Particularly, we're using 2 vCPUs and 6 gigs of RAM. So shared allocation resources isn't in contention for basically anybody in the environment. So that gives us huge performance improvements. The other piece is session integrity. With XenDesktop, we are using something called refresh on log off. So when a user logs in, they always get a fresh desktop. No corruption to any files. They basically in a read-only mode. And it allows the user basically to have a brand new desktop on every login. Lastly, what they're using is called persona management, which is more built off of Citrix's UPM, Unified Profile Manager. It allows the user still to have that personal feel to the virtual desktop. So they still get their favorites, they still get their My Documents, they still can do their icon sets and their shortcuts on their desktop the way they want it to. So we don't feel like we're forcing them into a system that they have to use it this particular way. They can still use it the way they want to. So that's been a really big win for us. And like I said, going to the VDI infrastructure allows a whole lot more stress relief than the shared environment. So it's something I would recommend a lot of organizations looking at. But that's what I have on this customer, and I'll pass it back to Amy here.
Great. Thank you, Christian, and thank you, Michael. We really appreciate your time today and walking over everything that we offer here at Forward Advantage and how to move communication over into a virtual environment, as well as the other services we have around virtualization. We do have another webinar coming up on Wednesday, September 2nd. This one will be a little bit more of a deep dive into our virtualization optimization services and focus on how those services can help improve the user experience. Please feel free to sign up for that webinar if you're interested in learning more about virtualization and what we can help you with here at Forward Advantage. It should be a great session. As always, feel free to contact anybody over here at Forward Advantage if you have any questions. We do have our communication director support team, as well as our IM1 support team that would help with our virtualization services. And if you're interested, call our sales team as well. They'll be able to answer any of your questions about moving your communication director over to a virtual environment if you're interested. We do have a little bit of time for some questions, so if anybody has some questions, please feel free to input them into the question box. It looks like I have one or two right now that have popped up, so let's take a look at those. The first one is, does Communication Director work in a virtual desktop? Michael or Christian, do you want to?
The quick answer is yes, definitely. We do have clients that are utilizing that now, and it's certainly something that anyone can do.
Great, good. And then the other question that's come through is, what version of Communication Director is supported by Virtual Desktop?
For Virtual Desktop, the latest version of Communication Director is required. You would need Communication Director 4 to be able to utilize that technology.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. I'll pop up the contact information once again so you guys can make sure. Oh, looks like we have one more question. Looks like we'll take that really quickly. Have you run into Windows printing issues with CDS in a virtual environment?
I have not, but it's really dependent on what the environment looks like or how the application utilizing CDS is configured. If you want to email us directly, we can definitely look a little bit more into that one. But I think Michael or myself can reply to you on that one via the email.
Good. Great. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and say thank you and remind everybody that this webinar was recorded, and we will be sending everybody who attended the recording. And again, thank you so much for your time, and feel free to contact us at any of these numbers or email addresses if you have any further questions. Thank you very much, and this concludes the webinar.